as most of us know it. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about Argon Co. So Argon Co are a global management consultancy. We've been around for over 20 years and really specialize in operations, strategy and transformation. I've worked on and off with Argon Co for pretty well the whole of that time, and actually one of the reasons that I've done that is because for me it's the perfect blend of actual technical expertise, of really understanding the front line and being very pragmatic, and actually being able to turn that into a deliverable strategy. And actually they're really nice people to work with, which is always helpful. Argon Co is actually over 16 countries now and continue to grow, so really got a global breadth now, and actually a lot of our clients are actually global companies, so hopefully that sort of sets the scene for you. So this is a bit of an experiment for us. Some of you may already be members of Connect, but I think a lot of people aren't. But we have set up Connect, which is a network of C-suite primarily, so leaders in operations and transformation. Really is a supportive environment to develop ideas, kick things around and just talk about things. And we run a series of events, from informative things like webinars through to small dinners over the course of the year. But this is one of the first times we're actually opening up that Connect to a wider group of people. So I'm going to be really interested to get your feedback as we go through this and afterwards, and just say how you found out. Was that useful, and should we be doing more of these things? In the meantime, if you have any questions, then please feel free to reach out to myself or to Bryan, who I am now going to hand over to. So Bryan, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Maria, can you spotlight me? Is that...
Oh, sorry, while Bryan's just getting set up, the one thing I should have said is, if you've got questions as we go along, please use the chat. And I will, if it's appropriate, interrupt Bryan at the point and share your question. And we are aiming for this to take about 45 minutes, and then there'll be about 50 minutes for questions at the end. But because there are so many of us on the call, please use chat as we go along. Thank you, Bryan.
Great. Thanks for everyone attending. Just very quickly, a bit of background on me. I joined Argon about 7 weeks ago. I joined from a startup scale-up that was heavily focused on AI and machine learning. So I've been deep into the AI for about 5 years. Prior to that, I've been a data strategy consultant. So I've moved for 15, 20 years, primarily doing board level data strategies for major FTSE 250 companies. And as part of that, kind of transitioned to machine learning and then to AI. But I've been very deep into the large language models. So generally we call things like Chat-GPT, LLMs. There are quite a few competing models now. Google has one. OpenAI is 49% owned by, invested in by Microsoft. And there's open source models, and this is exploding. So while I focus on OpenAI in this demo, there are competing offerings. But the biggest and most well-known is Chat-GPT, and I'm sure many of you have heard about that. So let's see if all the tech works. So just a bit of background on kind of where we've gotten to. I've been using OpenAI, the GTP3 in a production environment for about 1.5 years, slightly longer. That was released in a limited preview in June of last year. But really what kind of captured everyone's imagination happened very end of last year with the release of Chat-GPT. And you probably heard there's about 100 million users. It's now widely talked about and widely kind of considered as the leading tool in the space. And essentially, I mean, if you've seen it, it's kind of magical. And that's really what captured the world's imagination, is the ability and the knowledge behind the model to answer a very wide range of questions in a very kind of useful way. Within Argon, and for the last 6 or 7 months, I've been working with a number of multinational companies, kind of taking them on the journey, because their staff's starting to use it. There's a lot of use cases and potential for it. I just want to kind of show you kind of hands-on in a few minutes what it looks like, because a lot of people, a lot of executives I speak with have heard about it. Their kids or grandkids might be using it, but not many people have really dived into it and taken a look. So not a lot of PowerPoint here, but just I want to kind of give a some context of where we are and where the world's heading. So by and large, most companies and organizations are in what I'm calling the Wild West. There are pockets of people using these tools. Typically, in most organizations, it's unsanctioned. Policies may have been written in the last few months that say either don't use it or use it without putting any personal information in, any sort of GDPR compliant information into these systems. But I'm often reminded of a story my dad, who's an aerospace engineer, told me. His first job designing wind turbines was his manager didn't let anyone in the department use calculators. And when he wasn't in, every engineer opened their desk drawer and pulled out the calculator because it was better, faster. You know, it just gave the right answers. And that's largely where we are, is that a lot of staff are kind of feeling bad about using these tools, and they're kind of hiding its usage. So we're in this sort of Wild West. Where we need to get to, and where most organizations are very rapidly looking at, you know, it's kind of this level one called safe chatbot. So an environment where there are training and policies and governance procedures around some technology, and the technology is very simple, as you'll see, but it's mostly about starting to move up the adoption curve and allow people to use it because they want to, and it's not going away. As we move up the curve, kind of see, you know, kind of embedded AI, so kind of use case solutions, limited kind of productivity models. We've seen companies like Octopus, Energy, 35% of their inbound and outbound communications are now being handled by OpenAI. So they've embedded it directly in their customer service and seeing some really good benefits from that. And then in the next several years, we'll move up to proprietary AI, so applications that use it, and eventually kind of big, robust systems. But this is a journey. This is probably the rest of all of our professional careers will be interacting and using AI, both as consumers and as sort of leaders in the workspace. I ask, you know, why do we want to get started now? And there's three really key points, and I've spoken to hundreds of executives all the way down to kind of graduate level jobs. And young people, by and large, are saying two things. One is they're using it and they want to use it, and they want to use it professionally. And number two is they want it now rather than in a year's time. And they see the writing on the wall. They see that a lot of what these junior roles do are about to get eliminated. And overwhelmingly, they're saying, let us have it now, give us training, and let us replace ourselves. So that's a very common message that's coming across from young people. Additionally, you know, if you have a graduate intake coming in this summer, this autumn, they will have all used Chat-GPT. You know, whether you call it cheating or whether you do it for research, they are coming in with a level of literacy and expectation that that we need to acknowledge in the workforce. We need to start sanctioning the usage. There are already quite a few productivity and efficiency savings. I use it a couple hours a day. It's become part of my normal workflow. If I'm going to speak to any of you one-on-one after this, and I'd love to give you more in-depth information than this cursory review, I will write a dossier on your company using a version of Chat-GPT. I'm not going to go into that conversation cold. At the same time, it saves me the 45 minutes to an hour that I would have done deep research into your organization. It just gives me that base level context. And then as we move towards the future, there's, you know, the competitive landscape is changing. Your competitors are going to be using it. And this is a transformation journey. So there's change consequences and a lot of opportunity. And finally, talent attraction. I got asked by an HR director a few days ago, and they asked me, how do we filter out CVs that were written by Chat-GPT? Kind of the cover letter and the summary statement. And my comment back to this person was, well, maybe you should be filtering them out the other way. Maybe you should be looking for the people who are taking advantage of these tools and already have that skill set. So there's a bit of a mindset change coming. But that's into PowerPoint. But as Catherine said, if you have questions, stick them in chat. Hopefully I'm not going to get too technical, but I am fairly deep in these models. So let me just show you what most people see. So if you've ever logged into Chat-GPT, you're greeted with essentially a screen. And the best analogy I can come up with for what the LLMs are doing, it's like if Excel had been released today. So imagine there was no Excel, and all of a sudden Microsoft drops this product, which is a blank screen, and it turns out you can do pretty much everything in Excel. And that's how do we adapt the organization? How do we get people off of pen and paper? How do we get people out of Lotus 1, 2, 3 to show my age? There's a barrier to starting to use this tool. But let me just show you a few things about how this works. So I've got a few that I've made earlier. So imagine you're, a beverage manufacturer, heavy kind of user of Arabic gum. And you know that there is potentially an impact based on the Sudanese civil war. So I know what the answer is going to be here, but I've asked this about a current event question. And what we find is that, stop generating. It does not have this model, and for the foreseeable future, for the next kind of several years, models have to be trained on a base level of data, and that data takes a long time to clean and get right. So my understanding is OpenAI spent well over a year getting kind of its knowledge cleaned, sanitized in order to start training the model, which took roughly 6 months. So the cutoff for the current models is roughly September 2021. Now, Google's implementation is slightly later. There's other models that are pulling in more information more rapidly, but it does not have access to real-time information. Now, what you would typically do in the current world is use something like Bing. So I mentioned that Bing or OpenAI is heavily invested in by, that's not the one I want. You were saying I got a notification from Uber this morning and I wanted to turn off notifications. But let me go to the new Bing chat. So I had to switch over to the Edge browser, unfortunately. But say I'd ask that same question. And what's going to happen is Bing is going to actually search the web. So it's deploying what we call an agent. So sort of sub-AI bots that will go out and start searching the web. And then using other agents, we'll read those results and bring it back with a summary based on my question. So this is showing some of the direction of travel of where AI research is heading, in that this is giving me a decent understanding as a starting point. So it's kind of assuming I know nothing, because I actually didn't give it much expert context. And I certainly don't know much about Arabic gum. And it's giving me sources, so I can learn more, but you can see the footnotes are coming through. So we're talking about shortages, average price increases, and I can then interact with this. I can ask more detailed information or kind of take it down a route to learn more. But this is certainly one of the key kind of limitations, but also the direction of travel, is that these agents are doing other things in the background, and you can direct the agents, and I'll show you a few other examples of, providing better information. So let me go back to, so you may have noticed that I used in the first chat, there's two models up here, GTP 3.5, which is the standard kind of free version, and GTP4. And through the web interface, GTP4 is capped at 25 messages every 3 hours. It's essentially almost a freemium model. But one of the key things I noticed in chat, someone had a question about data privacy. If I go to settings and data controls, what we see here is that I have history and training. By default, it's on. So yeah, it does save my chats, but also it says allow them to be used to improve our models. And what this means is that OpenAI and all the other providers, including what we saw in Bing, are quite intelligently using the human interaction with these models to improve future versions of the model. It's there's 100 million users on Chat-GPT, which you've probably seen. It's literally the fastest growing web product ever, faster than Instagram or Facebook. It got to 100 million users in a matter of, I think, 2 months, 2 or 3 months. But what it means from a kind of, organizational and corporate privacy issue is that potentially in future models, if you were to paste it and say a shareholders agreement, and it has very specific company names, people that it's never seen before, and then someone in the future asks about that, the only training set it has, the only information it has about that to predict the next word, and that's all LLM's doing, is just using context to predict essentially the next word in a very kind of clever and advanced way. It might start to leak that information into the model, and then it could be released outside. So in a corporate setting, the interface provided by OpenAI, Chat-GPT, is never recommended to be used. There's too many issues. Instead, what we do is we use what's called an API. I think in the pre-reading, just for those that don't know an API is how the web interacts and how it works. Generally, it sends a message in a structured way to another server. It could be your own servers, your own databases, it could be a third party, in a known format, and that API then returns a response in a known format. So what I've been using is the API provided by OpenAI, and you actually pay on a per token basis. And a token is essentially a syllable. So last month for me, I put about 100,000 words in and out. So call me an extremely heavy user, and that cost me $27 in API calls. So I actually, and what a number of other companies are doing, are using your own potentially branded interface. And this is for knowledge workers. This is for office staff, kind of moving up that maturity curve. So getting to safe chatbot. And something like this is an open source front end that it's hosted here on chatbotui.com, but many companies are hosting this or something similar. And what this does is it allows me to kind of be a more advanced user. And you can see the difference between kind of not many options on GTP4 versus there's some additional things here. So I get to choose my model just like before. But the next thing I can do is I can start to generate what's called a system prompt. And this brings up the point about prompt engineering, which is a job that did not exist 18 months ago. I'm proud to say I was one of the first people to put that phrase onto LinkedIn, if not the first, because I saw that, seeing the direction of travel, that interacting with these models requires some training. And in the case, I had early access from almost 2 years ago. So I started to, learn how to engineer a prompt myself. the so what we can do here is a couple of things you can't do. First is I'm using the OpenAI key, API key, so I'm being billed for everything I put in or out. But at the same time, OpenAI has quite clearly said they're not using anything via the API in the retraining. So that leakage that I spoke about shouldn't happen. And a number of companies have gone down this route. If you were to start to implement this, you'd be by no means the first to start using an LLM with more sensitive information.
So Bryan,
sorry,
can I just interrupt you there? Because I think that's probably a key point. I know a lot of people are sort of basically saying at the moment, you can't use this at work. And to the point you made earlier, there's probably an awful lot of people who were guiltily using it on the quiet. Are you saying that actually this is potentially one of the ways that actually an organization can safely allow it and actually protect their data?
From a technology standpoint, yeah. So I'm seeing at least 4 companies I've spoken with in the last 2 weeks look at literally implementing this open source UI with a hard-coded API key, with corporate branding. But one important point is this movement from Wild West to safe chatbot and beyond, it's only 10% technology. I mean, at my startup scale up last year, I deployed, and I think I'm frozen. I've lost my train of thought with the tech.
We were talking about data privacy and using APIs. Yeah,
and the tech in my startup scale up, I deployed OpenAI to about 20 developers, another back office staff, another 20 back office staff. I did it in an afternoon. So from a technology standpoint, that's not the hurdles. We are looking at a situation where there is adoption issues, training, and there's different types of users, different types of kind of technology adoption mindsets. And 15% of the world generally are early adopters, 15% are strong resistors, and everyone else falls in this category of pragmatic skeptics or intrigued users. So to have different pathways for those different types of users and different training programs, the 15%, frankly, like me, the early adopters, we figure things out. We don't need much guidance or handholding or reassurance. Well, we kind of understand that that's the direction of travel. It's a very different situation. So my wife's a financial director, and she has access to OpenAI and has for a while. And I can't tell you the number of times I walk into her office and she's doing something. I mean, the other day she was cutting and pasting things out of a contract in Spanish and putting it into Google Translate. I was like, Heidi, just put the whole thing into in the interface I gave you. It's like, yeah, I kind of thought I could do something like that, but I just wasn't comfortable. So it's a match made in heaven between early adopter and strong skeptic in my household. But it's that's a good case study in kind of how you have to kind of handhold certain parts of the organization. And it goes back to this idea of the prompt engineer. It's this job that didn't exist, but having almost a help desk of people or a small team that knows how to use this and how to get the best out of it. And that's a key kind of role to set up on this transition. And there's several other roles on this journey that that you'd want to consider. So let me just share screen since we see that again. All right, don't get my head overlaying it anymore.
Yeah, that's fine. You can see that.
That's fine. So in terms of kind of engineering prompts, I'm going to go and I'm going to first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to engineer a prompt by telling the system more information. So if I go back, the default system prompt and what you don't get to see behind the scenes is you're a large language model trained by OpenAI, follow the user's instructions carefully, respond using Markdown. And Markdown's a format where you get bolds, headers. It's kind of a web-based format. I want to tell it a bit more. I want to say, so say we want to find out about what prompt engineering really is. Let's do some research on that topic on the fly. I'm asking it to write with a moderate degree of burstiness and perplexity. I don't have to do this, but if you want to help people cheat on their homework, all the detection algorithms right now are looking at text and saying how much burstiness and perplexity is there, which is essentially varying sentence lengths. It's how humans write. It's not how AI writes out of the box. So last month, about 1/3 of new articles being indexed by Google are being flagged as being written by AI. And I'm fairly certain that they haven't used burstiness or perplexity. But I'm asking it to write for a professional audience. It generally defaults to Zeds. So I've asked it to write in American English, British English instead. Then I'm asking, well-structured and written headers and bullet points using Markdown. And in fact, that's not really well written by me, but it gets the gist. And that's one of the great things about how I use this, or how a lot of people use it, is give it a stream of consciousness, provide your expert opinion on something, and then let it use its base level of knowledge. So, but the first thing I'm going to ask is, I'm going to ask it to describe the role of a prompt engineer in an organization looking to adapt large language models. So I've written that out because LLMs could refer to something else, giving a little bit more guidance. And also because this is only trained on up to September 2021. The wealth of information that's now out there hasn't really been fed through. So, if it was trained through last week, there's a lot of knowledge about LLMs, and it'd probably start to assume that meant large language models. But I'm going to help the chat on a journey. So I'm going to ask for clarifying questions. So it's done what I've asked in terms of structuring this with kind of markdown format. Interestingly, it has not asked for clarifying questions. It didn't actually listen to me in terms of clarifying questions. And this is, you can put the same prompts in several times and get slightly different answers. And that's because I've had the option to turn the creativity up to 1. So now it's giving me the clarifying questions. So answers. Let's just say we're doing operations, current maturity, P part of the wider. So I'm starting to give it some of my expert interpretation. Prompt engineers will sit within functional areas. Relationships, particular challenges, goals. I'll say OpenAI. Now, let me run that again. So
Bryan, just while it's generating, there's a question here from Stefan saying, how do you know about the quality of the answer you're getting? So when we were on Bing before, it was actually referencing, this isn't referencing anything.
No.
And I've certainly read in the paper instances where Chat-GPT's made up lies just because it wanted to give an answer. So how do we understand whether to believe the answers we're getting back?
Exactly. So the direction of travel is about using source material. But right now, there aren't clear linkages. So the LLM by itself has no sources. It doesn't know that it learned about this from a McKinsey white paper, an Argon thought piece, Gartner, wherever else. It just has incorporated that into the words into its model. The direction of travel is very much that we'll be expecting to have external sources. So like the Bing, that's a direction of travel. If I look at towards the end, here's where I've uploaded a file. So this is actually a PDF about Arabic gum in the Sudanese war, or at least Arabic gum in Sudan. A number of organizations are starting to upload, or not necessarily to OpenAI, but create what's called a vector database. So we think of SharePoint. SharePoint just stores files as they exist. A vector database is taking the text and is pre-generating the numerical values for the text so that LLMs can better access it. So what I've done here is I've uploaded a file. You have to trust me, this is a PDF. And if I scroll down, acronyms in the text, I asked a few questions just the last hour about it. It's taken that and it's starting to return information from the text as opposed to its general knowledge base. So there are, I think, no less than about 50 commercial offerings that have sprung up literally in the last 3 months, looking to create bespoke databases, bespoke vector databases on top of knowledge bases. So as a direction of travel, we're starting to get to that referencing. It's not fully formed yet. So as we move up from kind of level 1, which is, desktop, kind of safe UI, and the training involved. I mean, we have to understand and coach people, not taking this as gospel. But there are tools and techniques you can get to the footnoting.
Lucy's just asked a question saying, can you see a point in the future where actually potentially this is working on live feeds? And then Sally's followed up with a question saying, can you put your own material in and ask it to translate?
You can yeah, so it does. So second question first, it does work on multi-language.
Sorry, I didn't mean translators in language, albeit you made that point before. I meant as in summarize this document or, do something with this information.
Absolutely. So the way I just pulled an open source version of this. I have a lot more technical stuff on my computer that will do exactly that. But I just didn't want to have to flip back and forth to like what looks like code. So I'm trying to use a bit friendlier front end here. But that's exactly what we do. So I wrote a series of blog posts about 4 months ago and gave it a bunch of examples. Say, here is things I like. Now understand those examples, dozens and dozens of files. Now generate me some more information similar to that. That was a proof of concept. Catherine, does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I mean, just building on that point, I was actually talking to someone yesterday who actually she puts it a long, a white paper, and then will say, write me a LinkedIn post, write me an abstract summary. So actually then condense and manipulate the data. And what do you think to Lucy's point about, can you see live data being fed in at some point in the future?
Yeah, and that's absolutely where we're heading. Not necessarily into the model, but as inputs into the prompt. So all that's happening in that chat with the PDF example I showed here is behind the scenes. It's using the vector database and what we call semantic search to pull back the most relevant passages from the document, feeding it to the LLM model, say, try to answer this question using these facts from the document, and then it spits out the answer. And some of the paid versions that are out there, and there's other open source ones that you'd look to implement, that would actually footnote and give you the passage. A similar example is they're starting to do this for academic papers. So here's one that starts to get at facts. So this is, I've asked it just Arabic gum supply chain Sudan. Very generic question, but I can start to interact with the results that come back. So search for the paper, what was the, I can ask for it. But if I look at one of these papers, I can ask it then a question about that. So I'm getting
You can actually get the AI to actually condense and understand the paper for you.
Yeah.
Do you think we're all going to end up idiots who only know how to use AI, Bryan?
No, because the more you are an expert in a space, the more it provides value. I mean, I've talked to executives who, one of them called it their late afternoon CPU. So like, I get a bit tired in the afternoon. I know what I want. I don't want to have to necessarily delegate this task to someone else. So let it do the hard thinking and let me be the critical eye to critique and adapt. And that's what a lot of knowledge workers are using us. It's like, I know what this email should say. But the time it takes to write this email is burdensome. So that's one where kind of using it as your personal assistant. But the more expertise you have in it, the more it just becomes another executive called it their smart intern.
Okay. And what we've sort of strayed towards the sort of quite technical end of things. When you think about an organization, Bryan, which parts of an organization do you think are best placed to leverage LLM as it stands at the moment?
So across that maturity curve, going back to that idea, I mean, right now it's, we need to get out of the Wild West. So we need to get into the safe chatbot range. That's largely for the knowledge workers, and particularly, junior staff who are, looking at it and say 80% of what I do could be done by the AI. Now, ideally, they are training the AI. They're creating the kind of the overall, future. They're feeding the robots, as a friend of mine likes to call it, rather than being fed to the robots. So that's a key kind of part as we move forward. And there's two kind of conflicting views on how to proceed with this AI transformation, because really this is a transformation program, and it's not just, it's not a one-off activity. This is a ongoing effort, probably forever. And one school of thought says, let's collect as many use cases as we can. Let's find the specific ways to create apps. And, let's, a bit like, Excel lands. All right, let's use Excel for our accounts payable process, and get rid of things there. So specific use cases versus let's provide everyone access and let them figure out the best places to use an LLM. And then let's feed it back through and see really where the value is. Having tried to collect use cases, and in a call I had with someone in procurement a few days ago, we thought of 35 use cases in 30 minutes, a pretty overwhelming amount. Where do we get started? I'm very much of the view that rather than collecting 500 use cases, let's give everyone access, and let's let those with, considering 10% technology, 90% people, process, governance, training, adoption. And then let's find out the ways to really bubble up the use cases. And also, we need wrappers around this. We shouldn't be creating 10 different UIs. So that's one of the key directions of travel that we're seeing.
I've got a question here from Adam, which is, how do you see the role of consultants in the AI landscape? So does everyone become self-sufficient? All the companies become self-sufficient in a world of Chat-GPT?
No, of course not. Look, as I said, it's the more expertise you have in a space, the better results you get out of it. So where we're using it today and where we'll be using it in the future as consultants is some of the more mundane tasks. We all love PowerPoint. The direction of travel, Microsoft is in the process of integrating GPT-4 into Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. That's coming later this year. 20 companies in the US have access as an early release, and another, I know of 2 companies in the UK that have access to that early release. The creation of PowerPoint is going to be streamlined. Other things that, where consultants can benefit is around data analysis. So here's a sample data set, but I uploaded this and I can now chat with it. So rather than have to know SQL, Python, R, various other languages, fight with a data preparation tool, I can now start to filter, analyze. I can explore. I can ask questions about that data set. And you can see this is one of many apps. I can run prediction models. So here's a regression analysis on the data set. And then you can see deploy it to production. But this is done without having to learn the base level of data prep. So right now, JP Morgan, the investment bank, has a very robust Python training course for all analysts entering their kind of grad scheme. 20-something years ago, when I was looking to join JP Morgan out of university, that was an Excel course. And by the way, they took away your mouse at JP Morgan to teach you all the shortcuts. It's now moved to Python. In a matter of time, the Python skills will go away. And in fact, I wrote a notebook, and this is a data sciencey notebook, complete with Python graphs. You can see some of the Python code somewhere in here.
Bryan, I think, yeah.
But I did it. The point is,
out on us, Bryan.
point is, I did it using chat.
Yeah.
So I said, please interact with this data set, and here's what I want you to do.
Okay.
So I didn't know any Python. So where is it going to be used? So we're going to be able to upskill smart people who understand the business, but don't know Python. And that key skill gap is saying, I know what I need to have done. I don't need to talk to a developer. I don't need to talk to a data whiz on this. I can do it myself.
Okay, got a question here from Andrew. Are there any collaboration initiatives between industry and education sector to look at how best to embrace LLMs in education to stop this cheating mentality?
So giving a speech to about 100 parents tomorrow night. I'm also working with Bath University, who's actually taking a very forward-looking approach. It's not really my area, so I can't comment on the general feeling and direction. But a lot of questions are kind of exam questions are saying, "Show me your work. We know you're using it. Instead of giving me the output, give me the chat dialogue." And so you can see the research process and understanding and applying what they've learned as an expert, semi-expert view into the work. And yeah, it's a key skill set going forward. So I'm glad that some universities are starting to adopt to it.
Okay, fantastic. We've got about just under 10 minutes left on the call. So if anyone's got any more questions or things they want to ask Bryan about, now is the time to do so, please. I've got a comment here from Jane, who actually I can really relate to this. So Jane said, I've got my 83 and 86-year-old parents started with Chat-GPT last weekend. And actually my 82-year-old father is actually writing a book using Chat-GPT to condense various academic papers. So yeah, it's definitely accessible to anybody, which is fantastic. Got a question here from Sally. Prompts and learning how to ask the right questions become more challenging when the question doesn't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and that's where prompt engineering and understanding that structured kind of methodology of working your way through. So as I started to show, ask it for what it doesn't, what questions you need answered, and before it writes anything, ask it to create a structured summary of what it might write. It's actually, that's interesting path to go down, and use it as a collaborative research tool, not necessarily giving you 100% factual answers all the time, but giving you avenues to pursue that you may have not thought of. So yeah, I mean, everything I've learned about Arabic gum in the last week has come because I've just started chatting with it.
And so we've got a question here from Amajit. How long do you think it will take to progress through the levels of AI usage? So if we're in the Wild West at the moment, how long do you think it's going to take for us to move on from that?
A lot of it's organizational kind of nuances and constraints that you impose upon yourself. In a startup scale-up world, it was less than a day to get to safe chatbot and embedded AI. Another company I've been helping have been stuck. They've got executive sponsorship that say they want to do it, but they're stuck because they don't have the processes to work with IT in a fast and effective way to get that 10% done. We've got training modules ready to go, communication plans ready to go. It's that there's a disconnect between the business and IT in terms of moving quickly.
So if I'm a chief exec and I'm listening to this conversation and I'm going, oh my God, this is, this could move so rapidly, or the people who work for me are all secretly doing Chat-GPT. What are the things that I should take away and start thinking about?
Hate to say it, but it's really not one to be led by your IT organization. This is not an IT change. Now, I know a lot of companies that makes the most sense. It's the easiest part of this. So the two key governance bodies that I'm looking at are an AI steering group. So this is moving fast. And I should, kind of self-serving. I highly recommend expert external views to be part of that AI steering group. But I wake up every morning and there's something new. And when I started thinking about this talk a month ago, almost everything I've showed you wasn't available. So that notebook feature, not there. So that AI steering group has to be very, very agile in its thinking and should be set up to make changes quickly and empowered to drive everything in what would be a typical transformation journey. The second group that runs parallel to it is the AI policy steering group, because we talk about data privacy concerns. Organizations I know dive deeply into OpenAI's policies and other ones, generally coming out saying, yeah, it's probably good enough in terms of data protection. But then you have, kind of legal concerns, PII. So to have that group, and they also need to be agile because things are changing. There'll be new models. GTP 4.1 might come. So what does that do to the implications? What are your, So those are the two key groups. And then we talked about prompt engineers starting to get that base level of knowledge, because as much as your early adopters know about prompt engineering, people like me can't be the help desk, right? I'm already the help desk for friends and family and 80-year-old parents and next door neighbors. But I can't be adapting use cases and, even my wife, I'm not the help desk. So that's, there's a series of roles within that. But number one, consider it a transformation journey. This is an ongoing, piece of work. It's not a one-off.
Yeah, it's going to be, as you said at the beginning, it's going to be with us potentially for the rest of our professional careers, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got any last questions from anyone? Okay, well, so we're just coming to the end now. Do you think this is something that actually leaders at board level need to be engaging with, Bryan?
That's the best place to start this. But if not at the board level, you'll have functions that are already going down this path because they're seeing the value. We talked about procurement functions and the use cases there. So individual smaller level functions or, total supply chain, frankly, you're probably using this in marketing, whether you know it or not, because it's great at writing posts, articles, hopefully with a high degree of burstiness and perplexity to not get flagged by Google. So your functions are probably going down this route. IT is almost certainly going down this route. It's fantastic for developers. writing test scripts and, debugging. It really is quite amazing and quite a big time saver. But ideally, it's a transformation program that looks across the board. But,
Okay, well, fantastic, Bryan. Thank you very much indeed. I have certainly found that extremely interesting, and we're all getting some positive feedback in the chat. I'm just going to put up this screen just to remind people. So if you'd like to know more about Connect, then please reach out to Maria, who organises this. I'm also really keen to get your feedback on how you found this, because I said normally we keep this to within the Connect group. We've opened it up to a wider audience, so it would be great to just get that feedback about whether we should do more of these from time to time. And of course, if you're interested in starting on that AI and transformation journey, then please reach out to myself and or Bryan, and we'd be really happy to have some more conversations with you. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and have happy 4th of July, Bryan.
I'm only half American.
Okay, all right, great. Well, thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you on another one of these. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.